Welcome. We are going to go ahead and get started with our webinar today. And today we are going to be talking, get this to click through. We are going to be talking about the Olin MSF and which track is for you. So a little bit of the agenda of our webinar today is that we will talk about a Master of Science in Finance degree in general, and then we will talk about more specifically the Olin MSF. We'll talk a little bit about the faculty, the network opportunities, each track that we offer in the MSF, the student resources, the application process, and then of course allow time for you to answer and ask questions of us as well. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping things. Let's make sure, just so that you know, you have all been muted so that we can reduce our background noise. And I want to make sure that everyone can hear us. So if you are having any difficulty, either use the raise your hand function or just type a message in the chat box and I'll try to address that as soon as I can. Also, feel free throughout the presentation to write your questions into the Q&A function, and we will address those questions at the end of the session. So again, welcome. My name is Jessica Voss. I am an Associate Director of Graduate Programs here at Washington University in St. Louis, and I work with our Master of Science in Finance team. I am from the St. Louis area, and I joined the team here a little over a year ago. We are very lucky and have the pleasure of being joined by Todd Milbourn, who is Senior Associate Dean of Programs for Faculty and Research, and the Hubert C. and Dorothy R. Moog Professor of Finance. Todd also started this program a little over a decade ago and also served as its academic director in the beginning. So we're very lucky and welcome Todd to our presentation.
All right, well, thank you very much, Jessica. It's a pleasure to be here for sure, and I look forward to chatting through. We've got some prepared material for you here to talk about the program in general, talk about the specific tracks, and really if we're thinking of what question do we want to help you answer through this webinar, at least first and foremost is, given the multiple flavors of our Masters of Finance degree that we call different tracks, what's the right track for you? And we'll kind of talk through that as we're going. As Jessica gave a little background on herself, besides just being the old guy on the left of this screen as you're looking at it, I've been here since 2000. I'm originally from the Chicago area. Background was I went to a small liberal arts college on the very western edge of the state of Illinois. I was a math and economics major with a business finance specialty as well as kind of a third major from there. I'll come back to why that background fits with respect to this program when we talk about the different tracks. From there, went straight into a PhD program, did my PhD in finance at Indiana University in Bloomington. I've taught at two other places prior to coming here. So I taught at the London Business School. I was there for 3 years post-graduation, and then I came back to the States and visited as a visiting faculty member at the University of Chicago, now known as the Booth School. And I've been here since the year 2000. So I want to talk first just in general about what is a Master of Science in Finance degree? Obviously, you probably have some notions of what that is, or you wouldn't be viewing or attending a webinar on the topic. But I really just think a quick answer to what is a Master of Science in Finance degree is, obviously it's a graduate degree, it's an advanced degree, and it's a relatively specialized graduate degree, focusing in particular on areas of finance. And so, why would you ever think about a master's in finance? Well, typically it's because you're trying to either change your career trajectory or maybe increase the slope of that career trajectory in something in the finance space, whether that's, an investment analyst, whether it's going into investment banking, maybe it's a risk analyst, maybe it's more in portfolio construction, maybe you want to be the finance expert within a non-financial firm. And so any of those types of career aspirations, wealth advisory, wealth management, we'll talk through a lot of those. That's exactly what a degree like this is meant to do. I think another thing to keep in mind when exploring the option of a Master of Science in Finance degree is it's different from an MBA. Obviously, it's a post-undergraduate degree, so we'll call it a graduate degree. But it's going to be more specialized in the coursework, obviously, of a finance and supporting area relationship. An MBA is typically something you would do after a few years of work experience that may also have a finance focus, but is going to have more courses on strategy, understanding marketing, understanding how organizations work. We really take the core elements of that finance and then ramp them up a little bit because we've got more attention for you. So backgrounds of students that typically come into our Master of Science and Finance degree in particular, or MSF degrees in general, some will be, recent or just about to graduate undergraduate business majors who perhaps didn't have access to the type of finance careers they were interested in. As I mentioned in my undergraduate career, I had as a major, a business major with a finance focus, but I was in a graduating class of less than 500 people in a pretty rural area of one state in the US. So we didn't have a career center that could get me in front of a Goldman Sachs, that could get me in front of a PIMCO to, excuse me, to talk about those different careers. So maybe you've studied business, but you need not only to hone and refine some of those finance skills, you also need access to that marketplace. So that tends to be one sort of core group of students that comes through. Other students coming straight from undergraduate into an MSF or Master's of Finance degree, maybe coming from a more technical background. Hey, I was a math major, I was an engineering major, computer science, where I realize I have a good toolkit of quantitative skills, but I want to apply those in a field that's going to actually pay me for having those particular skills. And so we see a lot of our students coming through from that capacity. We also have folks that would be coming from what I'll call our third bucket, that maybe didn't study economics, maybe didn't study math, engineering, or anything business, but have just a good sort of intellectual base. They're curious, they're smart, they're good problem solvers. And so maybe they were an anthropology major, maybe even an economics major that wants to now get a specialized skill set with which they can go and approach the market. So that's kind of at a big level, that's the way to think about this program. I often joke with people that when I designed this original program that looks probably closest to the Corp Fin track that we have now, I really designed it for what did I wish was available for me at age 22, leaving with a math and economics degree as my primary areas of focus, of going in, learning more about finance, becoming skilled there, and then simply having access to a placement, to a career center, having access to a network of alums that worked in that space so that I could take those talents into there. And that was really how I thought about that as we designed this original program. And so we'll talk a little bit more on that as we start to proceed. So that's a bit on what a Master's of Finance degree is. Why should you do a WashU Olin MSF degree? And I think there's a number of reasons that you'd want to do this. I think for me, first and foremost, before we get into our core values and expertise that's here, Olin was actually among the very first U.S. business schools to actually roll out a sort of one-year specialized master's program. Historically, many engineering groups or math or stats departments might have had financial engineering degrees, but they were not sort of centered or even taught predominantly out of business schools. And we felt like that was a gap in the marketplace. So one big reason to come here to do this is we're among the first. Many people have copied us since, but obviously we do our best to stay ahead of the curve. Now, there's a number of other reasons that I think, why WashU Olin is the right place for you to consider and why you should apply and should try to get into our competitive program. At our core, Washington University in general and the Olin Business School in particular is a leading research institution, not only in the US, but globally. So as you look at this slide, there's some of our underlying values that we have that we keep in mind as we execute all of our programs. But for me, really our core mission as an institute of research and higher learning for students, we've got this on taglines, we even have it on rocks in our offices, create knowledge, inspire individuals, and transform business. And that really, those three elements capture the things that we do. Create knowledge is we have researchers, and I'll mention a few in just a bit, at the forefront of cutting edge finance research. What's happening, what should be happening, what might happen next. Inspiring individuals, that's where we take that research framework, we take that body of knowledge, bring it to the classroom in interactive ways. We bring it to the classroom in ways in which we can bring students along, and ultimately transforming business by arming you with the skill sets that so you can go out, make the right decisions, allocate the resources to the right activities, and ultimately add value both professionally as well as personally. Now, some of our faculty that I alluded to, we have 20 members of the finance group. So that group has grown quite precipitously over the last decade. But I just grabbed a handful of folks that were here. Two gentlemen to the right, Hong Lu and Radha Gopal. They're both academic directors. Hong Lu is an acclaimed asset pricing theorist, which means he writes Greek letter models trying to understand how investors should put their portfolios together, understanding transactions cost. He's a renowned researcher in his space. He's a chaired professor here. He is the academic director and essentially the overarching, in some sense, rabbi for the quantitative finance track that's here. To his right is Radha Gopal, a colleague of mine who I've done some research with, who's more on the corporate finance rather than the asset pricing or investment side. Does amazing work in empirical corporate finance of understanding how business groups come together, understanding CEO pay incentives, et cetera. Todd Gormley, who sits there in the second slot, is someone we've just hired back, actually stole him away from the Wharton School, who also works in areas very similar to Radha. And those would be some professors you would see across that curriculum. I put a picture of our colleague there, Phil Dybvig. He's been a chaired professor here since, I think, the late 80s is when he joined WashU Olin, and he really built up the research culture and the research institution. You may be familiar with Phil's name as the famed work of Diamond and Dybvig, which is, I think, arguably, if not for sure, I just need to verify that, the most highly cited banking paper in existence, kind of understanding the role of deposit insurance and preventing bank runs and crises. We just had the Nobel Prize in Economics award a few weeks back, and if you go look at betting markets in each of the years post-financial crisis, there are always odds given that Diamond and Dybvig will actually win that Nobel Prize. So they haven't won it yet, but it is, he's going to be around for a while, and so that's one to keep in mind of someone that clearly adds value from our research standpoint. One last reason to kind of think about Olin's MSF program across the board, besides at our core of what we do, besides the faculty with which you're going to interact both in and out of the classroom, is our amazing network. Our network with industry professionals at various corporations, not just nationally, but globally, but also just our vast alumni network that have come through not only our Masters of Finance programs, but have graduated from WashU or the business school with an undergraduate business program, or have gone out into the MBA program. You enter a network of thousands upon thousands of finance professionals that have ties and roots back to Washington University and Olin. As I mentioned, I've been in a number of different institutions. I've never been at one that's had a more sort of loyal and committed and interactive alumni that we ultimately have here. And so they show up for us in lots of ways. They show up in a value proposition manner for many of you, from they'll represent the companies that will come and hire our students, whether that's from JP Morgan, whether that is sort of a wealth manager of Buckingham Asset Management, whether it's coming from Goldman Sachs. Those are the kind of folks that ultimately come in and hire our students, but they'll also come in and be the industry professionals that you'll see in many of the coursework across the board. So it's not just what you get here, it's what you're going to get globally as you head out. So with that, let me jump into a little bit more specificity with respect to our Masters of Finance degree, and in particular, the different ways by which you could get a graduate degree, a Masters in Finance from us. We now have 4 tracks. We have just rolled out a 4th track that will be starting here this summer of 2017, the Wealth and Asset Management track. But our 4 tracks across the board, everyone who leaves with one of these leaves with a Master's of Science in Finance from Washington University and the Olin Business School. On the left side of this circle, we have the Corporate Finance and Investments track, and we have what I would call a sort of close cousin with some specialized coursework called the WAM track, or the Wealth and Asset Management track. So those 2 tracks have some greater similarities and commonalities that I'll come back to. In the upper right-hand corner, you see our Quantitative Finance track. And so historically, we had the Corp Fin and Quant track as really our 2 big tracks that have gone in, and that has led to sort of expansion in some sense, or even a diversification so that we could reach more students, provide more opportunities. And we also have our Global Master of Finance track. So the whole title or premise of doing this webinar was obviously give you a bit of background on WashU, Olin, and the MSF in particular. But as you're looking at this plethora of opportunities of which program to which I should apply, which track is right for you, let me talk a little bit about some of the specifics in each of these. Importantly, at the core of all four of these tracks, whether you do the Corp Fin, whether you're on the quant side, whether you're on the WAM side or the Global Master of Finance side, at a core, there is probably 60 to 70% overlap in courses. Anyone that's going to leave with an MS in finance degree is going to be well-versed in valuation. So everyone is going to take a series of valuation coursework. You also need to be versed in investment theory. And so across all four of these tracks, you're going to take coursework in investment theory. You're going to take coursework in fixed income, understanding the basics of derivatives, as well as a bit of financial statement analysis. We're not training you to be an auditor or a CPA, but the accounting and financial statements are really the language by which we're often valuing either assets, companies, projects, acquisitions, etc. And so that's going to be a common element across all of these. So those are things that are the same. If we want to think about the differences here and what I would want to keep in mind if I was in your shoes thinking about which to apply, I think differences in time commitment, differences in specific coursework desired, and differences in career aspirations are probably the defining elements that should probably help you to decide which of these tracks is right for you. So let me start on the difference of time. If we look at the left side of these, the Corp Fin track, as well as the Wealth and Asset Management track, both of those tracks on a full-time basis can be completed in just inside of 11 months. So you would take some coursework in the summer, some of which is online, some of which is on site, and then you would take the fall and spring semester coursework here. You'd be a graduate at May, and you'd be done with your master's degree inside of 1 year. If we think of time on the two program tracks to the right, the Quantitative Finance track takes about 18 months. You would also start in the summer, just like a Corp Fin track would. You would do some online coursework. You would come to campus to possibly do some coursework there. You would have both a fall and a spring semester. You would work on some things in that following summer, and then you would complete your degree about halfway through the following fall semester. So it becomes 3 semesters where you were definitely on site to complete that particular degree. Similar in time is our Global Master of Finance program, where you would spend a full summer, nearly a full summer on site with us here. The fall and spring semesters are with one of our number of partner schools, which I'll allude to what those would be later, where you would take coursework abroad in one of 5 or 6 different countries, whichever program you applied and to which you were accepted, and then you would come back to Olin for a second summer of completing coursework. And so the two tracks on the right are more of 18-month, about 1.5 years to basically complete the program. The two tracks on the left are going to be more for someone that wants to be done inside of a year. So as we're thinking of the 4 different tracks within the MS Finance degree, the one dimension of difference that I was just speaking through was time. Just to quickly bring everybody back up to speed, hopefully we're all logged back in. The Corp Fin as well as the WAM track can be completed inside of 1 year. The Quant and the Global Master of Finance tracks both would take about 1.5 years to complete. Now, another big key differentiator of thinking about what's the right track for you is going to be the specific coursework, and I'm going to couple that into your career aspirations. So someone very interested in issues related to company valuation, very interested in supporting companies either maybe on their acquisition team, so these would be non-financial companies, acquisition team, which R&D projects to roll out, which new initiatives and product lines to go out. Those are going to be folks that would be interested in, say, the Corp Fin side. If I'm interested in being an analyst and doing the fundamental research for a portfolio manager, a hedge fund, an endowment company, or any other asset manager that's there, both the Corp Fin as well as the wealth and asset management are going to have some key elements that help fit in that direction. If I had, and if we think about the Global Master of Finance, that curriculum matches identically from the coursework that's at Olin to our Corp Fin program. And so those type of career aspirations would hit those sort of three circles on the left. If I had interest in a bit more technical application, I had, a very high level of math aptitude. I know we've even had someone that was literally a rocket scientist. They had their PhD in astrophysics completed, came in and then did our quantitative finance program. If I was interested in being more of, this could be in the space of algorithmic programming for algorithmic trading, high frequency trading, risk analysis, things that tend to rely much more significantly on higher levels of math, understanding of stochastic calculus and solving differential equations in your sleep. That quantitative finance track is going to be more geared into that dimension. Another real, and I think probably the most important differentiator as you're thinking about your career aspirations is whether to seek out the degree and the training in a program that takes less than a year to a program that's going to take, say, a year and a half. Oftentimes that is also going to be driven by where you're trying to work and the ability of where you're going to have authorization to work. So if I am either a U.S. citizen or I already, let's say I'm a foreign-born citizen, but I have right to work authorization in the U.S., then a program that takes less than a year is still going to put you well in position to be on the job market and to be working, 12 months after the start of your particular program. For international students, certainly if you're paying attention to the news in terms of just over the last decade, as we look at data coming through, it is an increasingly difficult market if we don't already have authorization to work in the US to file and apply for an H-1B visa and to have that ability to get that on-the-job training when you're in the US. Two huge advantages to both the quantitative finance track as well as the Global Master of Finance track is because those degrees take a little bit longer time. That's more experience in the US that can also help to increase employment opportunities if you're trying to find employment in the US. Now, specifically to the quantitative finance track, because that has such a heavy mathematical component underlying its coursework, whether it's risk management, whether it's insurance, whether it's mathematical finance, etc., because that has such a mathematical rigor to it, that program actually has what's known as the Stem designation. And the beauty of the Stem designation is it gives you a much longer runway post-graduation for OPT, where you don't have to have a work visa at that point, but you're using your OPT, which lasts much longer than in any non-STEM program. That also increases your odds to show why you're of value to a potential employer. Now, if we're worried about employment opportunities, specifically in the US, the big advantage of the Global Master of Finance program is that you're going to end up, first advantage is you get 2 degrees. You'll have a Master of Science and Finance from WashU Olin, and you would have either another master degree from another institution outside of the US, and in one case, even an MBA degree from that institution when you're done. So you're done with 2 graduate degrees. You've also spent time in 2 separate countries from an educational standpoint, which should increase your global employment opportunities quite significantly. So if I was coming in, I wasn't a US citizen, or I didn't already have US work authorization, I would be inclined to be looking at the Global Master of Finance program if I was interested in a Corp Fin or WAM type of curriculum, but I knew that was going to be an uphill battle for me. Or if I was coming from that perspective and I had really a solid technical math and maybe computational background, then that quantitative finance is really sending you out with a unique skill set with that longer runway from the standpoint of STEM. So I think those are the big dimensions to keep in mind of which track is right for me. On the time dimension, career aspiration dimension, as well as the ability of where you think your employment opportunity is going to come from. Now, what I want to do is just spend just a couple minutes on each of these tracks, and in particular in differentiating these two tracks that are on the left, the Corp Fin and the WAM track as we're going through. As I had mentioned, these are in fact very similar programs where they're going through and they're going to have, core work in both valuation as well as core work in financial statement analysis and understanding investment theory. And so our Corp Fin program is really the longest standing track that we have. We've been doing this for a long time. So as I'm thinking about what types of careers I'm after, it could be an equity research position, fixed income research, investment banking analyst, a financial analyst inside of a corporation, making real decisions with sort of the underlying assets. And our coursework there you can see online is very well defined. There's elective choices within that. Maybe you want to take mergers and acquisitions. Maybe you want to know a little bit more about private equity, and you'd have some flexibility there. In this track, along with both the WAM and the Quantitative Finance track, that first bullet point you'll see is that every student is going to have the opportunity, and in fact, the requirement to work on a consulting project with a particular firm. And we can come back and talk about what some of those projects may look like as we go forward. The new track, and you're always most excited about your new baby as you roll it out. Over the last few years, we've had an increasing demand and push. I can't call it a nudge. It's been more of a shove from industry coming to us saying, we really want you to be training people that can go specifically into a wealth management, a wealth advisory, or an asset management position. And so we've responded to that feedback. We tend to be innovative. We're the first program to roll this out at a top business school in the country. Is you would still take about 60 to 70% of the same coursework as the Corp Fin track. You're going to work on a consulting project in this specific industry, but we have rolled out 5 new electives that are specific to someone that either wants to work for the providers of capital or the consumers of financial capital. So the consumers of financial capital could be, who's coming in to actually take on these funds. Providers of capital is much more on the wealth management and the institutional management, maybe working for a pension fund, maybe working for an endowment. And so we've got courses related specifically to wealth management, courses now specifically related to how do you work with endowments and foundations? What are some of the different rules to the game there? A new course on understanding legal, compliance, and taxation in that wealth management space. A new course on behavioral finance. And here it really is to work with either companies that are trying to get their securities purchased, those are the consumers of capital, or working on the side of those providing the capital from institutional investors or even individual investors across the board. So this program is going to roll out here this fall. It would start in the summer along with our Corp Fin. The beginning coursework again looks the same. For students thinking about the program where they think an 11-month degree fits their ability to find employment, fits their interest across the board, where we're going to ask you to apply to one track or the other. Someone coming in, there's so much, it's such a symbiotic relationship between these two tracks that someone that comes in from the Corp Fin maybe takes one of the wealth management courses as their elective and says that's the direction to go. The career paths and opportunities for both of those tracks, you would still have access to it. And that's something we're a small enough program where we can have a very hands-on and custom design what's going to be the best way for you to proceed. So don't panic too much of, gosh, if I go this route, does it close anything off? The answer is no. Right? At a core level, you're going to be a valuation expert. You're going to understand investment theory, and that's going to lead to some great opportunities from there. For those that really say, you know what, this is a huge industry, which it is, there is going to be a massive need for new wealth management, wealth advisors, and analysts that can support those capacities. I mean, I've seen tens of thousands as the projection of jobs over the next decade and a half that they're going to need new advisors coming in because when we take the average age of existing wealth management professionals, it's something in the upper 50s. When you weight it by the dollars of assets under management, that average age jumps up to almost 65. So much like the baby boomer type of retirement that has shockwaves in different mechanisms throughout the economy, this is one very particular to finance, where there is going to be a massive need for people that understand the new tools, whether that be robo-investing, whether that be understanding portfolio theory, to be able to move in, support, and ultimately start managing these books accordingly. Now, quickly on just the quantitative track, I'll say as much here as I said on the Corp Fin side. Again, you're taking that sort of foundation coursework, but then particular courses in risk management, particular courses in advanced, credit risk modeling, understanding a little bit more advanced, as well as at a mathematical level, the derivative usage that's out there. And so this becomes a more technical, the most technical offering of our 4 MSF finance tracks. They also work on a consulting project. They work with local firms on problems that are real, they're complicated, they're things that really give you a chance to kind of, stretch your legs, flex your muscles a bit in practice in ways that you can speak of those as you're going out to interview. And as I'd mentioned before, really importantly is this also has the Stem designation, which just helps so much if you're coming in trying to get a particular work authorization from there. And the last track that I want to mention, as I said, was the Global Masters of Finance program. Here, career paths look very similar to those coming out of Corp Fin, and and in many cases, the career paths that come out of the WAM track. The huge benefit with these is access to 2 excellent institutions. And so we have partnerships in Singapore, a partnership in Spain, a partnership in Korea, one in Germany, as well as one in Israel. And so you would take courses together at our end across people that would be spanning any of these 5 different joint degrees. And then in the fall and spring, you were going over to that institution, getting that culture, that training from there, and getting a master's degree from those. And so that's something to keep in mind with the Global Master of Finance program. We've tried to put some different pictures up to show they do a very cool residency program or sort of career trek going to both DC as well as going to New York as part of that kind of deep immersion into US markets. So that was really the big, maybe at a somewhat high level and partially deep dive at the level of thinking of what these different tracks are. Last piece that I wanted to mention before we do a couple more things related to our formal presentation, and then we're going to open it up for questions, is thinking about student resources. And so I think the key resources to keep in mind, 3 jump out at me. We have an excellent career center here. We've got amazing professionals. We work with students both domestic and internationally. We help get you ready for thinking about what's important to you, what are your core values, what's your value proposition to potential employers, making sure your resume looks top-notch, mock interviews, and those pieces. And that's something our Career Center manages, as well as using our network of alumni through mock interviews and trying to help people figure out, informationals. What's the best career path for me? We work quite a bit on experiential learning. These are these consulting projects that we have. And so we have a massive center for experiential learning that does a variety of activities that become really mini semester length consulting projects that we could do. And in that left corner there is something that's really important to us is our Wells Fargo Center for Finance and Accounting Research. So we refer to this center as CFAR. This is a research center that the finance and accounting faculty work jointly. It's been graciously funded by Wells Fargo advisors. It's really meant to bring faculty, students, as well as professionals from business together. And to think of those as 3 separate circles, faculty, students, and business professionals and practitioners, is to try, the whole purpose of a center is to increase the area of overlap between those 3 entities. And our 4th picture there is we can help you restock shelves at a grocery store or something if you need some side money. Now, I believe that was related to a particular project, but you can see we have all kinds of folks across the board. So I think I'm going to stop my portion for here. We'll give you some of the basic blocking and tackling, and then we'll take some questions.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you, Todd. That was really great to hear in depth about each of the programs. I want to apologize quickly for the interruption. Going forward, please just, if you have questions, put them into the webinar chat function so that we can address those questions moving forward at the end. To talk a little bit about the application, now that you know which track you're going to apply for and you want to submit your application, I want to give you a little bit of information and background on the application. So here at Olin, we really try to make the application as streamlined and as easy as possible, and it's comprised of these things. The first is an online application, so you'll visit the website and you'll open up a profile. You'll complete just a few questions that ask you a little bit about your academic background, some contact information, those types of things. And then you're going to upload your undergraduate transcripts. These can be unofficial transcripts at the time of application. Same thing for your test scores. We're going to want to see your GMAT or your GRE score. And again, at the time of application, this can be an unofficial test score that you will upload to the application. For international students, we are also going to require an English language skill assessment test, which would be the TOEFL or IELTS. Waiver information is available on the website, and we also require an English language skill assessment video as part of the process. It's a short video. You'll answer 3 questions with timed responses. There is a $100 application fee, but there are no letters of recommendation. So we'll just have you upload your most current resume as well as answer a couple of essay questions. Really take the opportunity in the essay to let us know who you are. We really like to use that to learn a little bit about your background, about your goals, and about who you will be as a student here at Olin. Deadlines. So the first round deadline has already passed. But the next deadline will be December 1st. That will be round 2. Our next deadline will be in February, and that will be our international student deadline, as well as the last deadline then being on April 3rd. If you have any questions about the application process or the admissions process, you are welcome to follow up with us after the event as well. So that brings us to the end here. We can talk about any questions that we have. I know we had one pop up in the Q&A box. If you can please put it back into the chat, I would really appreciate that. And we'll just wait and see if we get a couple questions. But I wanted to again thank Todd for joining us. This was a great opportunity to answer your questions and really get a unique chance to hear from the person behind the programs. So,
thank you, Jessica. I mean, one thing I'd want to add, and then there's one question that popped up here that I'm going to speak to, and then it looks like maybe some more might filter in as we go forward. I mean, really, this is an awesome place. I haven't stayed here for 17 years for lack of other opportunities. WashU Olin is just a unique community atmosphere that has amazing underlying rigor that's there. And so it's a caring environment, it's a collegial environment, it's a cooperative environment. And so on that side, it's a friendly place to be. We have awesome facilities. I think the thank you slide that sits up there shows one of our new buildings that we have come in, of just amazing spaces, group study rooms, etc. We've got access to things like Bloomberg terminals, not only in the library, but also in the graduate student lounge. There's a Bloomberg terminal there. We've got awesome resources from data sets, etc. People interested in research can work with faculty. And so, I can't say enough positives about the institution. One question that had come up was related to specific skills that you may pick up, not so much valuation skills and portfolio skills, but more competencies might be a better word that you would come through. So some of these that really come to mind, across all of our tracks, you would see the ability to either build up some of your skills from an econometric standpoint, either working in Stata or working in R. So if you were to take the research methods course, which is one of the ways in which you can satisfy across all the tracks the degree requirement to make sure that you understand sort of econometric and statistic modeling that could be applied to finance research, one class uses Stata all the way through. Has labs, has TA sessions to make sure you build up those skills. If you're adept in Stata, you can quickly move into things like SAS. A course that's taught by one of our economics faculty who's actually the leading leading Bayesian econometrician on the planet, Professor Sid Chib, teaches a data modeling course for us that can be taken in lieu of that research methods in finance class. There he's going to use the programming language of R across the board. On the quant side, in addition to those skills, you also have a course in Java. And then as your electives, you could take things from, data mining, machine learning, all the way to, introduction to artificial intelligence. And so you've got an awesome ability to take some more technical classes as part of our free trade agreement with other graduate schools, say in the computer side of the engineering school across the board. Something that we roll out and offer to students to take both in the fall as well as in the spring is we bring the training the street professionals to campus. And so typically in the fall, they put on a 2-day seminar related to corporate valuation. So this is an organization that actually investment banks on Wall Street and otherwise will hire them to come in and basically do their training of, okay, the basics of discounted cash flow, maybe even know the intricacies of it. Here's what that needs to look like in an investment banking or evaluation context. Talk about how do you think about transaction multiples, comps, etc. They also come in and put on a financial modeling version. Typically that is in the spring. Also do that in a 2-day format to really start honing up many of your Excel skills across the board. And so you've got lots of opportunities with which you can achieve those type of competencies. And those are the kind of things you're going to put on your resume. Hey, I'm adept in Stata. I'm adept in valuation metrics. Possibly I've already taken, the CFA level 1. Many students will do the self-study course, talk to faculty about that, and try to pass that either right at the end of their program or even between the second and third semester if they're on the quant side. And so that's something to keep in mind.
Very good.
As well.
Thank you. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and wrap our presentation. So I do encourage, if you have any additional questions, the email address is up on the screen there at olingradadmissions@woostel.edu. I again want to thank all of you for joining us today, as well as, again, a big thank you to Todd for joining us and helping us learn more about the program.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, and I hope to see all of you in one of my classes starting in the fall.
Thank you very much.